HR called me deadweight. Then the government froze $200 million in contracts. They say corporate loyalty means nothing once the right last name walks through the door, and I learned that the hard way. Before diving into the story, comment where you're watching from and don't forget to subscribe so you won't miss the latest stories. My name's Evelyn Grant, and for 7 years, I worked as the security liaison for a defense contractor called Stratagem Systems, a mid-sized firm that handled classified infrastructure projects for the U.S. government. I wasn't some desk clerk. I built the entire compliance system that kept us qualified for those federal contracts. Every background check, every audit, every clearance badge went through my desk. Then one Monday morning, I was told I was dead weight. I still remember the tone. Not even from my CEO, Richard Leland, but from his new son-in-law, Tyler, the freshly hired head of HR. A smug 29-year-old with a finance degree and an ego bigger than our entire department. He walked into my office like he owned the place, dropped a manila envelope on my desk, and said with that fake corporate sympathy, "Evelyn, we're restructuring. The company needs to cut dead weight." My first reaction wasn't anger. It was disbelief. Dead weight. I repeated, looking around my office, the walls covered in compliance certificates I had personally helped the company earn. "Yes," he said, adjusting his designer cufflinks. "We're optimizing operations. Your role's redundant now." Redundant? That's the word HR uses when they don't have the guts to say fired. I asked if Richard, my CEO, knew about this. Tyler smirked and said, "He signed off personally. He even had the nerve to make me hand over my security badge, my laptop, and my access card right there on the spot." I packed my few personal things into a box, trying not to show how badly my hands were shaking. The other employees pretended not to watch, but I could feel their eyes on me. That walk out of the office felt like walking through a storm of whispers. Outside, in the parking lot, I sat in my car for 20 minutes, staring at the badge in my hand. I had given this company everything: late nights, canceled vacations, personal time sacrificed for audits and deadlines. And now I was dead weight. But what Tyler didn't know was how government contracts actually worked. 2 weeks later, Stratagem Systems was due for its quarterly compliance review with the Department of Defense Liaison Office, a mandatory audit for all active defense contractors. It's not just paperwork. It's the difference between a business surviving or being blacklisted. I wasn't there to guide them anymore. Tyler had apparently replaced me with someone from corporate HR, a generalist with zero clearance experience named Jenna Marks. On the day of the review, the DoD liaison, Mr. Harlan Price, showed up at Stratagem's headquarters. According to my old coworker Ben, who later told me everything, the moment Harlan sat down, he frowned. "Where's your authorized security liaison?" he asked. Tyler, trying to impress, said proudly, "We cut her. I'm streamlining our HR department." Ben said the entire room went silent. Even the air conditioning seemed to stop humming. Then Harlan slowly turned his gaze toward Richard, the CEO. "You did what?" "That's the moment," Ben said, when Richard's hands started shaking. "Because here's the thing. Without an approved security liaison of record, Stratagem couldn't legally manage or access any classified project materials. It was a direct breach of contract. That single decision, cutting me without proper clearance transfer, wasn't just stupid. It was catastrophic." That day, Harlan put a temporary freeze on every one of Stratagem's contracts, nearly $200 million worth, until the company could provide proof of an authorized liaison. But since I was the only person officially vetted and registered in their system, they couldn't. And the best part? The process of reinstating a new liaison takes months. That's when the panic started. My phone began buzzing that afternoon with unknown numbers. Then an email from an old friend at Stratagem popped up in my inbox. "Evelyn, we need your help. Please call Richard. It's urgent." I didn't, because sometimes revenge doesn't need planning. Sometimes you just have to let people destroy themselves with their own arrogance. Still, part of me wanted to hear the desperation in Richard's voice. The man who once told me I was the backbone of the company, now watching everything crumble because of his new golden boy. It took only 3 weeks for the news to spread. Stratagem Systems was under federal review for non-compliance. Investors pulled back. Projects were halted midstream. Tyler, the self-proclaimed efficiency expert, suddenly stopped posting his motivational quotes on LinkedIn. And me? I finally slept through the night for the first time in years. Because the system I built so tightly, so meticulously, was doing exactly what it was designed to do: protect the government from incompetence. And in doing so, it protected me too. The first few days after being fired were a blur. I tried to convince myself it was just another career setback, that I'd find something else. But when you've been with a company for 7 years, when you've poured everything into it, it feels like a piece of your identity gets ripped away. I'd wake up at 6 a.m. out of habit, open my laptop, and realize there was nothing to check. No compliance dashboards, no security forms waiting for signatures, no late-night emails marked urgent from Richard. Just silence. That silence, at first, was unbearable. Then, about a week later, it became peaceful. I started going for walks in the morning. I made coffee slowly, instead of gulping it between meetings. I even called my mom, who said something that stuck with me. "Sweetheart, sometimes God closes doors because you've been standing in the wrong hallway too long." I didn't know it then, but that hallway was about to collapse, with everyone still standing inside. About 3 weeks after my firing, I met with Ben, my old coworker from Stratagem. He was a mid-level operations analyst, honest guy, hated office politics, always tried to do the right thing. We met at a quiet diner just off Route 29. He looked nervous, like he was afraid someone would see him talking to me. He leaned across the table and whispered, "Evelyn, you won't believe what's happening back there." Apparently, after my termination, chaos spread through the company like wildfire. The government freeze had gone from temporary to indefinite. The Defense Department wanted to conduct a full audit, every file, every badge, every background clearance. Without me there to explain the systems or fix the errors, they were drowning in red tape. The irony? Tyler, the new HR golden boy, had no clue how any of it worked. "He keeps saying, just hire another liaison," Ben said, stirring his coffee. "But the government doesn't just hire someone into that position. They have to go through months of clearance reviews. You can't just swap people in like it's retail." I tried to keep a straight face, but I felt that quiet, satisfying warmth inside. It wasn't vindictive. It was justice. Ben told me that the compliance portal, the secure system I had designed, had locked them out after my credentials expired. No one could update the access lists or verify employee clearances. Stratagem was essentially frozen in time. Richard had been calling emergency meetings daily. Tyler blamed IT issues. IT blamed miscommunication. But the truth was simple. They had built their empire on my system, and without me, it was just blinking screens and error codes. That night, I opened LinkedIn. I hadn't logged in for months. My inbox was full of messages, some from recruiters, some from competitors, and 2 from Stratagem employees I barely knew. One read, "Evelyn, they're trying to undo your system, but it's locked. No one can access the contracts. Everyone's freaking out." Another said, "They told us you left voluntarily. Then we found out the truth. I hope you're doing okay." I wasn't sure if I was okay, but I knew this. I didn't regret a single thing. Every hour I had spent making sure the company followed every letter of compliance law was now paying off in the sweetest way possible. A few days later, I got a call from an unknown DC number. Normally, I wouldn't pick up, but something told me to. "Ms. Grant," a firm voice said on the other end. "This is Special Agent Navarro, Department of Defense Contract Oversight Division. We'd like to schedule a brief conversation regarding your previous employment at Stratagem Systems." My stomach tightened. They weren't investigating me, were they? But Navarro quickly clarified. "You're not under review. Quite the opposite. We're conducting an audit, and your name keeps appearing as the listed point of contact for every classified clearance at Stratagem. We'd appreciate your insight." I agreed to meet him the next morning. We sat at a small government office near Arlington. Navarro was professional but clearly frustrated. "Your former company is stonewalling us," he said. "They can't provide basic verification documents. Frankly, it's a mess." He slid a document toward me. It was a list of every active Stratagem contract, most marked suspended. Do you have any knowledge of how this system was designed? I smiled politely. Yes, Agent Navarro. I designed it. For the next hour, I walked him through everything, the access layers, the clearance authentication protocols, the audit trails. Nothing illegal, just meticulous. Navarro's eyebrows rose more than once. Miss Grant, this is one of the most airtight compliance systems I've ever seen, he said. I just nodded. That's why I built it. To protect the government, not the company. When I left that building, something shifted inside me. For the first time since being fired, I didn't feel like a victim. I felt powerful. 2 days later, Stratagem made the news. A headline on a defense industry site read, Stratagem systems under federal suspension. Compliance failures linked to terminated employee. My phone exploded with messages, some shocked, some gossipy, and one from a number I hadn't seen in years. Richard Leland. Evelyn, I made a mistake. Please call me. I didn't answer. Then another one followed. We'll compensate you. Just help us fix this. Please. For years, I had stayed up nights to fix his messes. This time, I deleted the message. Because revenge doesn't always mean destroying someone. Sometimes, it just means walking away and letting the truth destroy them for you. By the time November rolled around, the Stratagem scandal had become an open secret in the defense community. Every contractor in DC was talking about it. The company that once bragged about its seamless compliance operations was now a punchline at industry conferences. But I wasn't laughing, at least not entirely, because even though they'd wronged me, part of me still cared. I had friends there, people who didn't deserve to lose their jobs because of one arrogant HR decision. That internal battle between justice and compassion kept me awake more nights than I'd like to admit. Then one evening Ben called again. His voice was shaky. Evelyn, it's bad. The audit team still camped out in the office. The government just escalated the review to a contract integrity investigation. They're saying there could be penalties. Personal liability. Penalties? I asked. For who? Mostly for Richard. Maybe Tyler too. But look, I heard they're trying to pin some of the blame on you. They're saying your system was too restrictive, that you failed to document the transfer process. That one sentence hit me like a brick. They fired me, froze me out of everything, and now they wanted to make me the scapegoat. I felt my blood go cold. Ben, I said quietly, I have everything documented. Every clearance transfer procedure, every sign-off, every email chain. They can't twist this. He hesitated. Evelyn, they might try. Richard's desperate. Investors are threatening to pull out. He's saying the only way to salvage the company is to prove this was your fault. That night, I opened an old hard drive, one I'd kept purely out of habit. It contained backups of every compliance report I'd ever filed. Not stolen data, just public records, timestamps, and system logs that showed I'd followed procedure to the letter. And just in case things got ugly, I backed it all up twice. A few days later, my phone buzzed again, this time with an email from Richard's attorney. Dear Ms. Grant, we're conducting an internal investigation and require clarification regarding your previous compliance role. Please provide any documents or statements at your earliest convenience. It was polite on the surface, but between the lines, I could read it clearly. They wanted a confession or a mistake they could weaponize. I took a deep breath and wrote back. All compliance procedures were performed according to federal guidelines and internal policy. Any deviations occurred after my termination. I trust your investigation will confirm that.
Short.
Professional.
No emotion.
That's how you fight in corporate America, with paper and precision. Within a week, things spiraled further for Stratagem. The Department of Defense escalated the freeze to a full contract suspension. The news broke publicly this time, picked up by a national outlet. Defense contractor Stratagem systems under investigation for security breach and mismanagement. The word breach made investors panic. Stock prices plummeted.
2 senior VPs resigned.
And Tyler, the HR mastermind, was nowhere to be found. Ben later told me that Tyler had quietly resigned for personal reasons. Rumor was Richard's daughter, the one Tyler had married, had filed for separation. The golden boy's fall from grace was swift and merciless. And I wish I could say I didn't feel a flicker of satisfaction, but I did. Then, one Friday morning, as I was sipping coffee, I got another call from Agent Navarro again. "Ms. Grant, I wanted to inform you personally. The department has concluded its review. You've been cleared of all responsibility. In fact, your documentation helped us identify the internal failures that led to Strategem's suspension." I exhaled in relief. "Thank you," I said softly. "Actually," Navarro added, "there's more. The agency is impressed with your compliance framework. We're recommending you as an independent consultant for future oversight projects. You built something remarkable." For a moment, I couldn't speak. The same system that got me fired was now opening new doors I never expected. A week later, I received one more message from Richard himself. It wasn't through email this time. It was handwritten, sent through overnight courier. The paper smelled faintly of the office cologne he always wore. "Evelyn, I know I can't undo what happened. I let my personal life cloud my judgment, and I trusted the wrong person. You are never dead weight. You were the reason this company ever had a chance. I'm sorry. Richard." I read it twice. Then I folded it neatly and placed it in a drawer. Not because I forgave him, but because for the first time I didn't need revenge anymore. I had already won. But karma wasn't finished yet. 2 days later, the Federal Contract Registry published a statement officially banning Stratagem Systems from bidding on any new government projects for 5 years due to compliance negligence and procedural failure. Translation: the company was dead. Ben texted me one line. "They're done. You were right all along." I looked out my apartment window at the winter skyline of DC, lights glinting off the Potomac. For the first time, I didn't feel small or disposable. I felt free. The following month felt like watching a storm roll across the DC skyline, one I hadn't started, but somehow controlled from afar. Stratagem's downfall wasn't just internal chaos anymore. It had gone public, and now every journalist, regulator, and investor wanted answers. Every headline stung Richard's pride. Stratagem Systems collapse tied to HR mismanagement. Compliance chief fired weeks before federal freeze. Sources claim nepotism led to $200 million contract suspension. I didn't have to say a word. The facts spoke for themselves. But one headline in particular made me pause. It wasn't from a big outlet, just a small industry newsletter, but it read, "Ex-employees system prevents $200 million misappropriation." That one hit different, because it wasn't about revenge anymore. It was about truth. A few days later, I was invited to speak at a federal contractors ethics seminar, the kind of event I'd quietly attended for years in the background, never thinking I'd be the one on stage. When the moderator introduced me as the compliance architect whose framework is now a federal model, the audience applauded politely. But I saw one face in the crowd that froze me for a second: Richard. Sitting near the back, looking smaller than I remembered. His hair was grayer, his eyes tired. He gave me a slight nod. Not arrogance this time, just acknowledgement. For a moment, I considered ignoring him, but something in me softened. Maybe because I'd already won. Maybe because revenge loses its flavor once justice is served. When it was my turn to speak, I took a deep breath and told my story, not the tabloid version, but the truth. I was fired for being redundant. What no one realized was that redundancy is what makes a system resilient. You can't cut corners when you deal with national security. You can't replace experience with convenience. The room went silent. I didn't build those systems to punish anyone. I continued. I built them to protect the work we do, to protect the trust taxpayers place in us. Compliance isn't about rules. It's about responsibility. When I finished, people actually stood and clapped. It wasn't a roaring cheer, just respectful, steady applause. The kind that means something. As I stepped off stage, Richard stood up too. He walked over, quietly extended his hand, and said, "I deserved everything that happened." I looked him straight in the eye. "You didn't deserve to lose everything, Richard. But you did deserve to learn what happens when you value loyalty less than politics." He nodded once, unable to argue. A week later, I received a letter from Agent Navarro again, this time official-looking and sealed with the Defense Department emblem. Inside was a formal offer. The Department of Defense Compliance Oversight Division hereby invites Ms. Evelyn Grant to serve as a contracted senior advisor on security and procedural auditing, effective immediately. I read it twice, then smiled. The woman HR had called dead weight was now being hired to teach federal agencies how to do things right. It was poetic. It was personal. It was justice. The irony didn't end there. Ben later told me that after Stratagem's collapse, a smaller firm had purchased their remaining assets, including the building, systems, and even the old office chairs. Guess who they hired as a compliance consultant to help recertify the contracts?
Me.
Walking through those same hallways months later felt surreal. The walls had been repainted, the logos replaced, but I could still feel the echoes, the tense meetings, the forced smiles, the silent panic before deadlines. When I reached my old office, now empty except for a desk, I stood in the doorway for a long moment. It wasn't anger I felt. It was closure. All those nights of self-doubt, the humiliation of being escorted out, the whispers behind my back, all of it had led me here. I sat down in the same chair Tyler had taken from me and whispered to myself, "You can't cut integrity and expect the system to survive." That night, as I left the building, I noticed something taped to the door of the old HR office. It was a dusty plaque that must have been left behind. Excellence through efficiency. I laughed quietly. Because efficiency without understanding isn't excellence, it's arrogance. And arrogance was exactly what had destroyed Stratagem. On the drive home, I got a text from Ben. Guess who the government just appointed to review Stratagem's liquidation audit? I texted back a single word.
Who?
He replied with a winking emoji and a single line. You. I burst out laughing right there in the car. Not a bitter laugh, just disbelief. Life really does come full circle sometimes. That night, I opened my window and watched the city lights flicker below. The same skyline I once looked at wondering how I'd rebuild my life now looked different, brighter, clearer, like I finally understood my place in it. I wasn't the victim of corporate politics anymore. I was proof that integrity outlasts ambition. And somewhere deep down, I hope Tyler was watching too. Not because I wanted him to suffer, but because I wanted him to learn. You can cut people out of a system, but you can't cut the system out of the people who built it. It's funny how revenge stories rarely end the way you think they will. People expect fireworks, some cinematic finale where the villain gets dragged out in handcuffs or the hero delivers a killer line before walking away. But real revenge, real justice, it's quieter than that. It's the silence that follows when the truth finally settles and everyone who doubted you realizes they were wrong. That's what my life became after Stratagem fell. Silence, but a peaceful one this time. In the months that followed, I settled into my new role as a senior compliance advisor. My office was small but comfortable, overlooking the Potomac River. Some days I'd catch myself staring out the window, thinking about how close I'd come to giving up. I wasn't making millions, but I was respected. My phone no longer rang with frantic middle-of-the-night calls demanding I fix someone else's mess. And for the first time in years, I was doing work that mattered, not for profit, but for principle. I even started mentoring younger professionals who were just entering the compliance world. They'd often ask me the same question. What's the worst thing that ever happened to you in your career? And I'd smile and say, getting fired. Then I'd pause and add, and it was also the best thing that ever happened to me. Because losing that job didn't ruin me.
It revealed me.
One afternoon, I was reviewing documents in the new firm's office when Ben walked in with 2 coffees. He joined the same company a few months earlier, and it felt good having someone from the old world in this new one. He dropped the cup on my desk and said, "You'll love this." Then he slid a printed article toward me. The headline read, "Former Stratagem Executive Under Investigation for Misuse of Funds." I skimmed the text. Apparently, after the company's collapse, Richard had been questioned about irregularities in executive expense accounts. It wasn't criminal, but it was humiliating.
Ben grinned.
Guess who the compliance officer reviewing his case is? I looked up, eyebrows raised. Don't tell me. He nodded.
Yep.
You. I laughed. Oh, the irony. Going to go easy on him? Ben asked. I thought about it for a second.
No.
But I'll be fair. That's enough. Because revenge doesn't always mean payback. Sometimes it just means doing your job better than the people who tried to destroy you. Weeks later, I got a message from Richard himself. This time, it wasn't desperate, it was humble. Evelyn, I heard about your new role. I'm glad someone finally recognized what I ignored for too long. I want you to know, I lost everything, but I gained perspective. I hope you're well. For the first time, I didn't feel anger reading his words. I just felt done. I typed a short reply. Thank you, Richard. I wish you peace. And that was it. No bitterness, no revenge speech.
Just peace.
But the universe has a wicked sense of humor. A few weeks later, I attended a National Defense Compliance Conference, the biggest event of the year. As I checked in at registration, I heard a familiar name over the loudspeaker. Next session, Lessons from Stratagem, a case study in organizational failure. I couldn't help but laugh. The company that once called me dead weight was now a case study in what not to do. When I stepped into the ballroom, I noticed slides projected on the screen, timelines, audit failures, and ironically, screenshots of the very systems I had built years ago. The presenter, a young consultant, pointed at one slide and said, "If you look closely, you'll see where Stratagem went wrong. They removed their designated security liaison without ensuring federal continuity. That single decision triggered a chain reaction that froze $200 million in contracts." Then he paused and added, "The irony? The system itself was flawless. The failure was human." The audience murmured in agreement. I sat in the back row, sipping my coffee, and couldn't help but smile. It was surreal hearing strangers analyze the story of my downfall and realizing that, in the end, it had become a lesson for others. That night, I drove home through the quiet streets of Arlington. The air was crisp and the city lights shimmered against the river. For the first time in a long while, I felt proud, not of the revenge, not of the downfall, but of the integrity that carried me through it all. As I parked and walked up to my apartment, I thought about everything I'd lost and everything I'd gained. Getting fired had stripped me of status, comfort, and identity. But it also forced me to rebuild myself on something stronger, self-worth. I realized that revenge wasn't about watching someone fall. It was about rising without them. A few weeks later, on a calm Sunday morning, I found that old Stratagem badge in a drawer, the one Tyler made me hand over on my last day. I turned it over in my hand and looked at the company's faded logo. For a moment, I thought about keeping it as a trophy. But then I smiled, dropped it into the trash, and whispered, "You were right, Tyler. I was dead weight, just not in the way you thought." Because sometimes what they call dead weight is the only thing holding everything together. And when you remove it, the whole system collapses.